Welcome to Diabetes Primetime, everybody. We are here with Melinda Maryniuk tonight talking about how to afford the diabetes medications and supplies that we need to live a healthy life. Answer our trivia question and you'll be entered into a drawing for a free meter and a year's supply of test strips. So let's get started. Melinda, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Ansley. I'm so glad to be here.
So folks, a quick shout out to say hello in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If this is your first time watching, write hashtag first time in the comments so everyone can say welcome. So Melinda, there's been a lot of coverage in the media about the cost of diabetes medications, particularly insulin. But the truth is that diabetes medications and supplies cost a lot of money. And we wanted to use this episode as a way to talk about how people might get some tips that they can use to make their care less expensive. So if someone's watching right now, shaking their head saying, heck yes, diabetes is costing me a lot of money, what would be the first thing that you would suggest that they do?
And heck yes, it does cost a lot of money. In fact, in just the last 10 years, the price of insulin has tripled. It's gone up 3 times. So this is real. This is real.
It's not your imagination.
Right. So I think the first and most important thing that needs to be done is have a really honest conversation with your physician or diabetes educator, your care providers. Because not only do you want to share that this may be hard for you to make the payments for the medicine, but also what does that mean? In other words, does it mean that you've been taking less of the medicine than you should be? Oftentimes we see people struggling and trying to do their best and not wanting to admit it to their doctors.
Sure.
And as we'll talk about, there are some things that can be done. So be honest not only about what this means in terms of your medicines, but also are you struggling to make payments for the food that you need or your electricity or whatever. So
Sure.
having those honest conversations with your doctor, even though you might not think it's a medical issue, it really is. It affects your overall health.
So I think this is so important because there's so many things that you're saying that are important. The cost of medications does mean sometimes that we don't take the medications that we need. And that's the most important thing that we absolutely want to be communicating to our doctor.
Right,
You know,
right.
this is just too expensive and I just can't afford it.
Right.
And I also think it's really important to recognize there are probably a lot of people for whom the cost of medications is a real struggle.
Yes.
So that should not be a source of shame. That
No.
should just be, between the donut hole with Medicare.
Right.
There are so many reasons why,
Right.
the cost of medications are going up
Yeah.
as well.
There are a lot of things that are just out of our control and we're stuck with it. So it's important to know about some of the things you actually can do or look for.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of those things. We
Okay.
want to talk to our doctor, but what else should we be doing?
All right, so one thing that I never even thought about was it's important to shop around. When we're looking for a car or for, a new refrigerator, you don't just go buy the first one you see, right?
Right. You don't say
So-
that store's close to me, I'll go there.
Right. I just sort of assumed that all prices of medicine were the same. And
Right.
it was just my copay that would cover it or whatever. They really can vary. So take time to look at both where you're currently getting it and a variety of other places, including some of the big box stores, I'll call it
Sure.
like Walmart and Costco, because those prices are often quite a bit cheaper.
Okay.
So first of all, shop around. And second of all, there are a number of really good coupon and rebate programs to be familiar with.
Okay.
And we're going to post some links and some names of some of them. But one is called goodrx.com, and they can link you to and lead you to a variety of coupons. And one is called rxpharmacycoupon.com.
Okay.
So find out about some of the coupons and services that you might be able to benefit.
And we will provide a whole bunch of those in the comments. So be sure to check out in the comments what else we're talking about. So what I hear you saying is, I think there's often a temptation to think the price is the price
Right.
when it comes to medications. But what I hear you saying is that's not the case at
No,
all.
no.
We need to be really deliberate. Maybe we should be thinking about mail order.
Yep.
Maybe we should be, shopping around and seeing what costs what where.
Right, right.
No.
Some things you may not be able to do something about. You might not be able to find a coupon for exactly what you have, but there may be some things that can be done. And also your medical care team, your diabetes educator and physician might also have some programs and coupons and services that could benefit you as well. So another really good reason to bring that up.
Okay, I love it. All right, we're going to come back to medications in a second, but folks, it is time for trivia right now. So tonight's trivia question is sponsored by Arkwright, and if you answer tonight's question, you will be entered into a drawing to win a free meter and a year's supply of test strips. Yes, folks, that is 600 test strips delivered straight to your door. So definitely put an answer in the comments for this trivia question. So our trivia question tonight is, how many new cases of diabetes are diagnosed in the U.S. every year? Is it A, 5 million, B, 3.2 million, or C, 1.4 million? And that trivia question again is, how many new cases of diabetes are diagnosed in the U.S. every year? Is it A, 5 million, B, 3.2 million, or C, 1.4 million? Leave an answer in the comments for us, and just for answering, regardless of whether you're right, you will be entered to win our drawing for a free GlucoCard Shine meter and a year supply, 600 test strips shipped straight to your door. And trivia and our meter drawing tonight is brought to you by Arkwright. Arkwright has been working for over 50 years to make the lives of people with diabetes simpler and easier. Their blood glucose monitoring products and personalized approach to diabetes management helps empower people to live richer, healthier lives. They make our show possible, and we really appreciate it. So speaking of blood glucose monitoring, meters, strips, all of that can get pretty expensive too. So how might someone go about making checking their blood sugar less expensive?
Yes. So first of all, find out how often do you need to be checking your blood sugar? Not just, I have to do it 3 times a day because that's what my friend does. So find out for you personally what that information is used for and how often is important. Now, if you are taking insulin, particularly if you're taking pre-meal insulin or what we call an intensive insulin program, you probably are checking at least 3 or 4 times a day.
Absolutely.
So it's really important to reduce the risk of hypoglycemia. And so that's a group that is definitely checking more frequently. However, there are a lot of folks that might be just taking 1 or 2 pills, and neither pill, like metformin, might not be triggering low blood glucose.
Sure.
Their A1C is in good target level. They really may not need to be checking at all or only occasionally. And the times when you really want to check more often is if you're feeling ill, if you are planning a pregnancy,
Sure.
if you have some change, you're doing some unexpected exercise or changing your diet. Definitely you want to see if there's a change in that. But sometimes people whose A1C is in target feel like they have to be checking a couple times a day when they don't. So first of all, the first step is you may be checking more than you need to, but for many people, you're not checking enough. So you want to find out.
Got to figure out what's happening with you,
Right.
and definitely talking to your physician about what he or she feels is right for you.
Right.
And you did also point out, that's going to change over time, right? When we're starting a new
Absolutely.
medication or when we're, changing perhaps the number of carbs we're eating.
Yes.
We want to be, frequently, checking and seeing
You
what's
want to
happening
see
a little
how
bit
that
more.
affects your blood glucose. Right.
Absolutely. And I know another time, and we'll talk about this in a second, but checking to see what's happening when we eat certain foods.
Right.
Checking before and after a meal. And, we'll talk about that for
Okay.
a moment. But I do think it's important to recognize that there are lots of programs. Melinda was talking earlier about, making sure you shop around and see, what things cost at different places. There are a lot of programs at pharmacies across the country where you can get test strips for less than your copay. So you
Yes.
can pay cash and with no rebate card, pay $10 to $15 for 50 test strips. So sometimes I think we think I only get the test strips that my insurance company provides. But actually, if you would like to learn more about what's happening with your blood glucose when you're sick or, because you're trying a new medication, there are other options. So if you'd like to learn more about those pharmacy programs, we'll provide more information through our website and through the link in the comments. So let's take a step back a little bit and talk about checking in pairs.
Okay.
And talk about how that can be helpful for people, maybe exploring how different foods affect their blood sugar.
Sure. So by paired checking, we mean checking before a meal, generally about the time you start, and then about 2 hours after. And don't use the judgment of how your blood sugar is being affected by that meal if you do it just once. You really need to do it 2 or 3 times in a row with similar foods. Because if you're checking before and after, let's say a breakfast where you're having oatmeal and blueberries and nuts or something, and if it's much higher than expected, you might say, oh, well, that means I can't eat oatmeal and blueberries. But it might be that there was something else that was affecting it to go up.
There are so many things
you
that
need
affect
to
blood glucose.
repeat it.
Yeah.
You need to repeat it. You can't just make that judgment based on one time doing it. So you have to kind of go into a mindset of, I'm doing a little experiment, and only changing one or two things at a time.
One or two things at a
repeating
time.
it. Yeah.
So I think what's valuable about that is the truth that, a lot of times we think, oh, oatmeal is perhaps higher in carbs, so it's not something I should eat. But different carbs affect people differently. So corn may make someone's blood glucose go up pretty high, whereas for someone else it might be pasta.
Right,
so that
right.
that paired checking really allows you to see what's true for you.
Right. And so often we just focus on the carbohydrate and we think, oh my gosh, it's making my blood sugar go up. But we forget the fact that that meal also is going to likely, hopefully, contain some protein and fat. And that's going to mitigate that rise.
Yes.
So at one meal, you might have had the oatmeal with some almonds in it, or with some butter on some toast, or some whole milk yogurt along with it. And that fat will keep the response down more than it would be if you just had the carbohydrate. So it's really hard to think about the impact of one particular food. It's also what's surrounding the rest of that meal.
The meal. And I
Right.
think you're right. I think so often we think, oh, as a snack, we might just have an apple. But what I've learned from you is pairing that apple with some cheese or some peanut butter is actually a much, much healthier snack because you're adding some protein and fat in.
Right, right.
Why is that? Why does that make such a difference?
Because the first thing that gets digested and absorbed when all that food hits the stomach is the carbohydrate. So that is absorbed right away. And the protein and the fat, the more you have in there, it slows down the release of that carbohydrate and the subsequent rise of your glucose levels.
Okay.
So we really encourage meals to be a nice, healthy mix and have plenty of fat. And that's such a change from the way we used to talk even just 5 or 10 years ago, when we were encouraging people to keep the amount of fat low and we were recommending everything be low fat. We didn't realize fully how valuable the fat is to actually help sort of lessen that overall glycemic response. So in some ways, we want to give the better message that healthy fats, especially plant-based fats, are really good for you.
Okay. I'm so glad you touched on that, because I do think that is kind of a misnomer that's still out there. And also the fact that we tend to think of our meals just in terms of these component parts when really they work together to form, a whole.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about checking in pairs. When we asked in our Facebook group for questions about, the cost of diabetes and what people wanted to know from an educator, we got actually several questions about food. Good. And I think that's a true reflection that there are a lot of people who, for the time being, are using metformin and diet and exercise to manage their diabetes. So ready for some questions about food?
Sure.
All right. So Sue asked, what are some suggestions for eating out when burgers are so much cheaper than salad? Good point, Sue.
Yeah, burgers are cheaper than salad, and fast food places in general are relatively cheap.
Inexpensive, right?
Yeah. So are highly processed foods.
Yes.
And when you think about the least healthy foods, they tend to be the cheapest foods. So it can be a challenge, and some of it involves really planning ahead. It doesn't mean you don't eat in fast food, but it means looking at the menu ahead of time, identifying, and oftentimes fast food places can give you a card with nutrition information on it so you can choose what would be a better choice. And frankly, you mentioned hamburger. That's often not the worst choice in terms of calories and fat. There are things that are often far worse. And when I say hamburger, I mean the small sort of at McDonald's, the kid size burger,
not the double Whopper with not that we're calling out any brands, but yes.
Right. But it's trying to find that right balance between minimally processed and trying to not have too much sort of fast food that you can pick up that's highly processed, as well as minimizing fast food that has really too many calories. But think about how to create a meal. For example, one of the suggestions I urge people to think about is when the rotisserie chickens go on sale in your supermarket. For my place, it's $4.99 for a fully cooked chicken. You take that, you pull off your meat, you've got, a frozen veggie and some kind of grain, brown rice, and you've got a meal quickly.
Right.
So thinking about, budget friendly, fast, and convenient.
All right, so we're going to come back to a whole bunch of budget-friendly suggestions. Melinda wrote a wonderful article for us about budget-friendly ideas for how to eat healthy on a budget. We're going to come back to that. But I have a couple more questions. So Tisha asks, I need help with my snacks. I work for a retail place that leaves me alone in the morning to run a store. I eat breakfast and have a morning snack, but my usual go-to snacks are Kind bars and peanut butter sandwiches. I need things that are quick and they can't be messy, but I am so tired of Kind bars. What else can I do? Gosh, I know that feeling.
Yeah, you can get in a rut sometimes. Some people really like consistency of always having the same breakfast or the same lunch. It sort of minimizes the amount of thinking that has to go into it. But on the other hand, it can get boring quickly. So I'd probably take a few minutes, Tisha, and just write down foods that you really like and that you would like to figure out how to work in as a snack. And I think especially when you're on the go, pre-packing things in little snack bags really helps. So if you're throwing in some crackers or some carrots, baby carrots, some almonds, some peanuts. Nuts are really good because they're mostly protein and fat. It's going to help you feel full and stay full longer. Certainly, there are a number of kinds of other healthier bars, like Kind bars, and you can just check the label and see which ones fit best for you.
Absolutely. And don't necessarily believe that the label acts like it's healthy. There's been several really interesting articles recently about kind of health washing of foods where it seems like it's really healthy, like green juice, and really it's not. So check those nutrition facts labels. I'm sorry.
Exactly. No. I'm just trying to help you think of things that don't spoil quickly. And, the processed cheese sticks or the little round cheese that you with
the string cheese.
Cover. Yeah. I mean that can last hours in your bag, and it's a quick pull, and that also will keep you full. So think a little bit of the protein and fat as being a really valuable thing to keep you full. So we've got lots of suggestions in one of the handouts that we've done.
Yes,
for
and
snacks.
we will link to that in the comments. We have a really fun graphic with a whole bunch of really cool common ideas. Melinda broke them up if you want something sweet, if you want something crunchy, and she gave us some really, really healthy, good suggestions for that. Josephine also asked a question. She said, I would love any suggestions around variety in meals. Breakfast in particular, I really struggle with. And that's something you and I have talked about. The plate method is wonderful, but sometimes it's hard to kind of figure out how it applies to breakfast. What would you say to Josephine?
Yeah, it really doesn't apply. I mean, I don't want to urge anybody to have half your plate full of vegetables for breakfast, all right?
Because sometimes you don't want to. Sometimes it's a great idea.
But sometimes working it in, like, sauteed spinach and mushrooms in your omelet or with your eggs is great.
Yes.
But I would urge you to think about a source of protein, and that's either going to be in dairy, such as yogurt or cottage cheese or cheese, and a source of protein in the form of meat or egg or fish or lean meat. So having some kind of protein is really important, as well as some kind of carbohydrate, whether that's a whole grain or whether that's a whole fruit, or a dairy also has some carbohydrates, so mixing with that. So the kinds of breakfast ideas that I think about, and also we've got a handout that provides lots of ideas, is thinking, for example, of pre-making little egg cups into muffin tins and just putting your scrambled egg mixture maybe with a little green pepper or onion or spinach and bake them like you're making muffins. I pull mine all out, I freeze them, and then I pull one out in the morning.
What an easy...
Super easy. Overnight oats, really popular, and you can try so many varieties with your whole grain oats and then with some yogurt or with some cinnamon or some flavorings or some blueberries.
All right, Melinda, what's your favorite overnight oats recipe right now? What are you loving?
So I actually have been I make sort of a chia blueberry mixture. Ooh. So I boil up frozen blueberries, about a cup, and then I put 2 tablespoons of chia in there, and it just gels. I don't add any sugar.
Chia gets with the liquid. It kind of
gives a little extra fiber. It doesn't have any carbohydrate. And then I mix that with the yogurt, and I put that with the oats and a little cinnamon in the morning. It's fantastic.
Melinda's delicious overnight oats. I knew if I asked you to have a good answer.
Well, you got my birthday. And in the summer, I've been adding peaches to my blueberries and chia and putting that all together.
Such a nice combination. I love that. All right. So hopefully, Josephine, that gives you some good breakfast ideas. We'll also put some breakfast options in the comments as well. Melinda's given us a ton of great ideas. Lynn Marie asks, is the ADA doing anything to keep medication costs down? How can we organize to make sure that insulin and other supplies aren't overpriced? Great question from Lynn Marie. What would you
and
say?
it's such a challenge, and I'm really proud of the American Diabetes Association, as well as the pharmaceutical companies are really trying to look at this and figure out what can we do. Currently, there's a bipartisan act that's gone before Congress. I believe the name of it is called the Insulin Cost Reduction Act, to find ways to incentivize the pharma companies to keep the costs down for people taking insulin.
So needed.
We're really hopeful. The American Diabetes Association is behind this bill, and I think everybody is.
Sure.
We've really got to try to take some steps to help people, particularly on insulin.
So ADA is behind this?
They're definitely behind this. So stay tuned. And in fact, you can follow on the ADA website. They post regularly what's happening with the bill. So
that's great. Okay,
hopefully-
stay
hopefully good
tuned.
news. Yeah.
So speaking of cost of medications, our Amazon Choice comment of the week is from Diane. She says, I'm on Medicare, and every year I hit the donut hole, and my medications become basically insanely expensive. Is there anything I can do? Before you answer that, Melinda, a big thank you to our sponsor, Amazon's Choice brand of blood glucose monitors and blood pressure monitoring products. They make healthcare more affordable, and we're very appreciative to them for sponsoring the show. So someone who's facing the donut hole, suddenly medications go from pretty affordable to the list price, which is really expensive.
Right.
What should someone like Diane do when she's entering that donut hole territory?
Right. Well, make sure, first of all, that you've had the conversation with your doctor so that they know that this is a challenge, because perhaps there is a different kind of medicine that you could be going on. Perhaps you're taking 2 pills that actually come in the form of one. There's so many combination pills that you could be represcribed something different. Perhaps some of the coupon and rebate programs that we talked about would help. There are also a number of pharmacy patient assistance programs that are available that could be looked into. And some of these are names like Needy Meds and RX Meds. We'll put some of the names up there because there are assistance programs that can help through some of these difficult periods. But have that conversation.
And, kind of circling back to what you were saying earlier about talking to your doctor, often, we're taking a medication in a given class of medications, and there is either a generic available that's less expensive, or, you were talking about a combination medication. Sometimes those can be more expensive, and we can be on the 2 individual pieces, and it can be more affordable. So sometimes it's kind of more just kind of trying to triage that time when you're in the donut hole.
Right.
Maybe adjust your medications a little bit with your doctor, and then wait till you're through it, if that makes sense.
Right. And it might be that you are getting a 30-day supply of your medicines, and maybe a 90-day supply could be ordered, so you don't have extra copays. So there are a number of things that can be explored.
So definitely just be curious and talk to your doctor or your diabetes educator. I know diabetes educators in particular, this is a common issue. And so getting creative and figuring out, what to be done, they're real resources.
Yeah, the diabetes educator is really helpful. And also your community pharmacist can be really helpful to have you troubleshoot some of these things.
Yes. And folks, if you've had something that's helped you afford medications, please put it in the comments and share. I know hearing what's worked for other people is always inspiring to me, and I know other people would really enjoy hearing from you. Mandy Reese, a pharmacist who we did a show with recently, talked about bringing the formulary for our health plan into a doctor's appointment to actually go through with our physician so they're aware of what is actually covered and therefore might be less expensive. So that's kind of an easy tactic to try. All right, so if someone is on insulin, really that's been kind of the focus of what is so expensive. What are the options that a person has for more affordable insulin therapy?
So recognize that the newer insulins, which we refer to as the analog insulins, are really what's driving the cost up. And they are terrific. They work really well. They work really quickly. They are what people tend to be on if they're taking pre-meal insulin and a long-acting insulin. However, they are expensive. Know that the earlier insulins, the human insulins, are also excellent, and they're much, much cheaper. So some people might feel like, oh, I'm going backwards. My doctor is suggesting that I take this old insulin. That does not mean it's not good. It is much more affordable. In fact, almost cheap.
And I will actually say really quickly, $25, $24.88 at Walmart. So very affordable per vial. Yes, it is a trade-off. You are kind of going back to, older technology. but still very effective and definitely affordable.
Yeah.
If it's a choice between no insulin and human insulin every time.
Right. Now, it does mean that there's certain things that you're going to have to learn or relearn.
Yes.
Because, for example,
They work differently.
They work differently. The human insulin takes a little bit longer to really start working. And so instead of taking it with your meal, if that's what you were used to doing, you might now have to take it 15 to 30 minutes before your meal because it's a little
Okay.
slower to ramp up.
Okay.
Now, there's not a long-acting insulin, but there's something called an intermediate-acting insulin. So NPH
okay.
insulin was the state-of-the-art insulin for a long time. It works hardest in the middle of the afternoon. You need to know that that might put you at risk for a low blood sugar, and that you might have to have a snack at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. You also have to know that it comes in what's called a kind of cloudy suspension, and you have to roll it and mix it in a certain way.
Okay.
So it's not just an automatic switch from the new
No.
insulin to the old
Yes.
insulin. Take time with an educator or your physician and learn what you would need to do. But know if you're currently struggling with the costs of your analog insulins, there are other options.
There
that
are
can be
other
talked
options
about.
that do work. You're just going to have to work with your doctor and understand what's happening.
Right.
I think that's so important because for so many folks, insulin is what they need to be on. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it works for them, they're doing well, and you know, it doesn't need to be $300 a vial.
Right.
It's also really important to recognize that there are copay cards, there are programs from the manufacturers that you can look into. There are always samples if you're kind of in a short-term situation. You know, talk to your doctor. They're going to have the best resources for
Yeah.
you.
The worst thing to do is just start using less to make it stretch out for the
Yes.
month.
Yes.
Because then your diabetes is going to probably go out of whack, or your A1C will slowly rise, and that's not good for anybody.
That is the absolute worst scenario. You know, when we talked to Dr. Anderson, he's a physician in Nashville, and he said, you know, the only thing a person with diabetes can ever do wrong is not talk to me about what's happening to them. I want to know. And so
Right.
I think it's such a good reminder to hear from, you know, physicians care about what's happening in our lives. And the more information they have, the better they can help us. So I think that's so good.
Right.
Any other suggestions for affording medications or thriving really kind of on a budget with diabetes?
Yeah. Well, one thing that occurs to me is take the time to really look at what your insurance does cover.
Yes.
So maybe there's not a lot that can be done about the medicines, but for example, your insurance plan might cover a whole exercise program that you never knew. I've been talking with people recently that have gone on Medicare, and they said, oh my gosh, I didn't know with my Medicare Advantage program, it's a silver sneakers program, I get a free Y membership. I had no idea. Or therapeutic shoes are covered if you need them for diabetes.
Right.
So there are often a lot of benefits that are hidden. Your insurance company may not be
Waving a
saying,
flag.
look, we want to give you more money back. But recognize what are the benefits that you are already getting you might not even realize you have. So really dig a little deeper into the benefits of the insurance program you have.
So let's talk just for a minute about healthy eating on a budget. If
Sure.
someone is trying to eat healthy, what are some easy, perhaps, swaps that they might be able to make to reduce that food bill at the end of the month?
Yeah.
What suggestions might you have for someone?
Well, when you talk about healthy eating, the first thing I have to say is make your list by looking at what you already have. Unfortunately, so much of our budget goes on wasted food. And we buy things, we're planning to use it, and then we don't use it, and that's really wasted money. So I
Sure.
think our first step is build your menus around what you've got in your cupboard, in your freezer, in your
It can
refrigerator.
almost become kind of a challenge. Sometimes
yeah.
I'll find something and I'm like, I should go ahead and use this. And it's like, what am I going to do with this? Like,
Right,
it just becomes like a
right.
little bit of an obstacle course of meal planning.
True,
Kinda can
but
be
get
fun.
better at using your freezer and freezer
Yes.
baggies and things, and make a plan. You know, put it on a list so you don't waste that. So when you're on a budget, that's the most important thing that you
Just
can do.
don't be throwing food away.
Right.
Figure out how to use what you have.
Right. And then recognizing where you are spending your money. And unfortunately, sometimes the cheaper food it costs less, but it's so unhealthy for you that there's better ways to find, like, instead of buying the prepackaged snacks that come in the little bags, buy a large volume of them and put them in your own snack bags. So you're not paying the extra for all that prepackaging.
convenience.
But yeah. So it might mean that you're doing a little extra work, but the savings benefits
significant.
So yeah, I just went on vacation last week, and before I went, I cooked a whole turkey breast and froze the two sides, so I wouldn't be paying a lot of money for deli meat. It's also not quite as healthy. And I roasted 2 chickens, pulled all the meat off that, and just put it in freezer bags. So a little bit of planning ahead will really, really help with that. There's
think
so
that's
many
great.
instant foods that we have instead of the instant oatmeal, using the whole oats instead of the more expensive fish, which is so good for us, and we want to make sure we have fish, but it can be really expensive, using lesser expensive either frozen cuts or fish like tilapia, which is a little bit less expensive. So looking for things that are less. Quinoa is very popular. It's delicious, but it's costly. Brown rice gives you some of the same benefits. So thinking about some of those kind of swaps can help.
So getting creative in terms of, I can use this, I'll get the same nutritional benefit. For
Yeah.
me, and you were the one who actually suggested this, moving to canned and frozen vegetables has made my life so much easier on so many dimensions. It's less expensive for one,
Yeah.
but also I don't have that food waste problem. I used to feel sick inside when I'd have to throw away a bag of spinach or a head of cauliflower or
Pull
broccoli.
out what you need.
Yeah.
Use it.
Use it. And then you don't have to worry about that waste. It's going to be good for
Right.
another 6 months in the freezer and it'll
Right.
be totally fine.
And
I
canned
love that.
can be so great. And the only caveat, we just urge people to rinse it so you can get that
Yes.
extra salt.
So
off,
like with
because
canned beans,
often
for example.
Canned beans,
Yes.
canned vegetables, just sort of rinse it. Even canned fruit might have some extra
Syrup.
sweetener or syrup in there. But otherwise, it's great to have some of those things in your pantry, especially for backup meals. So
I love it. Such a great suggestion, Melinda. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's always a pleasure, and I always
can't
learn
believe the time
so
is
much.
done.
I know it goes so quickly when we're together, folks. This has been such a jam-packed show with such great information. Before we go, here is the answer to tonight's trivia question. There are 1.4 million people diagnosed with diabetes every year in the U.S. Everyone who gave us the answer will be entered to win will be entered into our drawing for a free glucose card shine meter with a year's worth of test strips. Yep, 600 test strips. We will do that drawing on August 9th and we'll notify the winner via Facebook Messenger. So be on the lookout to see if it's you. Melinda, thank you again.
Thanks,
we
Ansley.
so appreciate it. And we will look forward to seeing you next time, folks. Good night.